Hi, everyone. Welcome in. So happy that you all are here. Excited. This is our second to last session of season 3 of Power. I cannot believe that it is happening already, and also that it is May already. That seems a bit kooky, but welcome everyone in. My name is Kayla Fulginetti. I am the Senior Director at Elephants&tea. And just so excited to have you here, whether this is your first time with us or you are back or returning for the umpteenth time. Welcome in. This is season 3 of AYA Power, Moving Forward with Purpose. For those of you that might be new, Power is a training initiative to provide all of the oncology workforce with education, resources, all for the adolescent and young adult cancer community, brought to you in partnership between Elephants&tea and the AYA Oncology Education Working Group. Each month, we do bring in an expert speaker to share information and insights on topics that are really relevant to AYAs with cancer. And each of our sessions are recorded. So I always like to bring this up multiple times. We have a library of this season, the past 2 seasons, all available on our Power website. So if you miss a session, or if you want to go back to something that was shared, or if you want to share it to your colleagues and let them know that there's this information out there that is free and available for them to continue their education and learning around all of these amazing topics for the AYA population. We will make sure, if it hasn't been done already, I will make sure to share that in chat so you can check that out. Just a little bit of housekeeping, and then I will pass the mic off. First, just a huge thank you to our sponsors for supporting Power, our founding sponsor, I'm Not Done Yet Foundation, and our supporting sponsor, Azi Pharmaceuticals. We always also really look forward to the engagement within this community. So there should be a Q&A button at the bottom. Please feel free to drop questions. Our expert is here for a reason, to provide education and answer those questions that you have been looking forward to asking. So we will make sure that we facilitate that Q&A for you at the end of the session. We also, as always, just want to recognize the hard work that you all are doing every single day. Thank you for what you do to support the young adults that you are taking care of, and helping us move forward in caring for the AYA community. So with that, I will pass it off to my friend, Dr. Mike Roth, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Kayla. And I'm glad you said that we're friends. I don't think you've said that publicly before. So it's a privilege to introduce our speaker today. We have a really wonderful session, and this is an area that is a key gap in knowledge for patients, for providers, for other key stakeholders, family members. So I know I will be paying close attention, and I think we really need to do a good job disseminating this information within our group and across our teams. So on that note, it is a pleasure to introduce our speaker, Monica Bryant. She is a cancer rights attorney, speaker, and author dedicated to improving access to quality information about the legal and practical issues that can impact individuals diagnosed with cancer. She is the co-founder and chief mission officer of Triage Cancer, a national nonprofit organization that provides free education and resources to patients, caregivers, and professionals who serve them. Monica is an adjunct law professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago School of Law, where she teaches a course on cancer rights. She also serves on multiple national task forces and advisory groups focused on healthcare and legal advocacy, including those led by the American Bar Association, the American Cancer Society, and many others. Monica is an adjunct law professor, which I just said, and also just important to note that she is really a national and international expert on the topic here. So on that note, sorry for the fumble at the end. And Monica, I'm going to kick it over to you and just say thank you again for what you're doing for us here. But even more importantly, thanks for what you do every day just for so many patients. It really is so impactful. And we receive feedback from our patients in Houston all of the time about the work that you guys do. So on that note, I'll pass it over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and for the opportunity to come and talk to you all a little bit about the organization and cancer-related legal issues. I will also extend my apologies for having to reschedule this session due to being sick, and we're going to try to make it through without too much coughing. So as was mentioned, Triage Cancer is a national nonprofit dedicated to providing free education on these legal and practical issues. And we really take a multidisciplinary approach to that education. So we're absolutely providing information to patients and caregivers. We have hundreds of patient advocacy partners that we, respect and love working with. And then, of course, we are also providing education to healthcare providers because you all are on the front lines. You are often the ones sitting in front of the patients and might hear an offhanded comment about something that someone is struggling with. And by getting educated about these cancer-related legal issues, it might spark something in that offhanded comment for you to then know there is an opportunity to connect that person to resources. So we provide the education in a variety of ways. We host about 30 free educational events a year for patients and caregivers, but also healthcare professionals. All of our educational events are accredited to provide continuing education to nurses, social workers, patient advocates, and HR professionals. And then we have a plethora of materials and resources. You'll notice that we provide the information in lots of different ways because we try to meet people where they are. It might be about education level. It might be about capacity for more information. You all know how much medical information people have to learn and digest after a diagnosis, and then we're asking them to learn the law on top of that. And so we know people learn in different ways and have different capacities, which is why we provide the information in so many different ways. But a lot of times when I tell someone I'm a cancer rights attorney, the question I get back is, what is legal about cancer? And the short answer is actually almost everything. From what medications someone has access to what health insurance has to cover, to what somebody's rights are at work or at school or in the housing context, to government benefits, to estate planning and medical decision making, and everything in between. So the reality is everything about cancer is rooted in the law. The other reality is that these legal issues are also the contributing factors to financial toxicity. And we talk a lot about financial toxicity in the cancer community. And frankly, it was coined in 2013 as a thing, and yet we're still talking about it at every event I go to. And one of the reasons that we think that is true is that there are multiple contributing factors to financial toxicity. And well, sometimes people land on the idea that the reason people experience financial toxicity is because of the cost of care. We actually think the more significant factors are somebody's health insurance status. And that could mean not having health insurance at all. But more often what we see is that someone doesn't have the right policy for them, or they don't know how to effectively use the policy they have. And then the employment changes that can occur after a diagnosis are going to impact finances. And certainly that could be for the person who's in diagnosed themselves, but it could also be the family members who have employment changes because now they're acting as caregivers to someone in the family. And then particularly relevant, I think, for AYAs, the life changes that happen, whether it's relationship changes or moving or graduating from school, all those things outside of a cancer diagnosis are going to impact finances. But when we layer on the cancer diagnosis, it's going to just compound the challenges. Now, these contributing factors, everybody experiences them. But for the AYA community specifically, they are often harder hit by these factors for a variety of reasons. It might be that they are just starting out in their career, so they don't quite have the nest egg that an older individual might have to help tide them over. It might be that they don't have a spouse or a partner to support them. And so if they are perhaps aging out of their parents' insurance, they don't have a spouse that they can rely on for that insurance. And so there are just an added layer when we're talking about these challenges with AYAs specifically. A lot of what we talk to people about are decisions that need to be made while they are navigating some sort of transition. And this, again, happens to everybody, But for AYAs, they're going to experience more transitions throughout the continuum of care and into survivorship. And their choices may be more limited based on the fact that they are an AYA. And so it is important to know that we're going to talk about a lot of things, and they may not all be relevant to that person in that moment, but more often than not, throughout that continuum of care, they are going to have to make decisions about work or school or insurance or finances. Returning back to work, is it the same job? Going back to school, is it the same school? What supports do you need? And as each one of those transition happens, they might have to make health insurance choices as well. So it is important for people to understand all of their insurance options. And in this country, there are 3 places we get insurance. About 50% of Americans get their insurance through an employer. Now, that could be their employer, it could be their spouse's employer, it could be their parents' employer, but it's employer-based insurance. Then there's individuals who get insurance through the government, primarily through Medicare and Medicaid. And then there are people that go directly to an insurance company to get their insurance. But regardless of where they get their insurance, there are some terms that people need to understand. And I realize that you all may be very well versed in these terms, but we have data that shows us that 96% of Americans can't define the 4 most basic terms used in health insurance. So if we are asking people to effectively choose policies and navigate policies, but they don't understand the words, we are doing them a disservice. So to give you an example of how we would talk about what these terms are and what they mean, specifically around the costs associated with health insurance, first of all, we're all going to pay a monthly premium. It's a fixed dollar amount that we're going to pay every single month, whether we go to the doctor or not. It's like having car insurance all year, but never getting into an accident. But then there are extra costs when you actually use your health insurance. Every policy is going to have a deductible, which is a fixed dollar amount that someone has to pay each year before their insurance kicks in. You could have a $500 deductible, you could have a $5,000 deductible. It just depends on the policy. But once you meet that deductible, then insurance kicks in and is going to pay a percentage, which is known as a co-insurance or a cost share. You're going to pay this each time you get care. So if you have an 80-20 plan, you've met your deductible, insurance covers 80%, you're responsible for 20%. And then many policies have an additional payment called a copayment. And this again is a fixed dollar amount that's going to depend on the plan, but it could also depend on the service. So maybe you have a plan with a $25 copayment to see your doctor, but a $35 copayment to see a specialist, and a $250 copayment if you go to the ER. Now, a lot of times when I talk to providers around these topics, they will say to me, well, I can't tell my patients what their care is going to cost. I don't know what their treatment is going to cost. And that's fair, but it doesn't matter what it's going to cost. What matters is how much is the patient going to be responsible for paying? And we can tell them that. And the reason we can tell them that is that most plans have an out-of-pocket maximum, which is a dollar figure that represents the most someone is going to pay out of pocket for covered care in that year. And different policies will have a different math problem for how you get to the out-of-pocket maximum. But in marketplace plans, it's adding up everything you pay towards your deductible, everything you pay towards your copayments, and everything you pay in your coinsurance. So it's everything you're paying out of pocket except that monthly premium. So if care is going to last a calendar year, we can tell patients up front, this is the most you're going to pay out of pocket for your care this year. Of course, sometimes it crosses over years, but again, we can still give them benchmarks of the most that they're going to pay. This concept also becomes really important when people are trying to pick their health insurance policies, because so often people are only looking at that monthly premium and not at the other pieces of the puzzle. So I just want to give you a quick example. Meet Michael. Michael has a plan with a $2,000 deductible. It's a 70-30 co-insurance, and he has an $8,000 out-of-pocket maximum. He hasn't gone to the doctor yet this year, but he gets into an accident and ends up with a $72,000 hospital bill. So what does he actually have to pay? The first thing we always pay is the deductible. So he pays us $2,000. It leaves $70,000 left of the bill. Now his co-insurance kicks in and he's responsible for 30% or $21,000. But he has an $8,000 out-of-pocket maximum. So what does he have to pay of that $21,000? $6,000, because he's already paid $2,000 in his deductible. Once he pays $6,000, he's met his out-of-pocket maximum and insurance will cover the rest. So we're not suggesting that the out-of-pocket maximums haven't gone up and that $8,000 isn't a lot of money. But when we're thinking about how we can effectively help people navigate this, maybe now Michael's in a position where he's trying to get financial assistance to pay that $8,000, which is very different than trying to find financial assistance to pay the $72,000. I mentioned the marketplaces, and these were created by the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And there's a lot of confusion about what these marketplaces are, but essentially they're a health insurance shopping mall. So what's being sold in the marketplaces is private insurance. So it falls in the top of our triangle of coverage. There are some benefits to buying in the marketplace, including some financial assistance. Now, during COVID, we had some pieces of legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act that added financial assistance to the marketplaces, and they were known as the enhanced premium tax credits. And actually what we found was that 4 out of 5 customers were able to find a plan for $10 a month or less. It also added financial assistance at the top end. So even if people had higher incomes, but their insurance was costing them more than 8.5% of their income, they would get financial assistance to bring those costs down. So this was really significant, and we saw millions of people, including AYAs, get access to health insurance with these enhanced premium tax credits. Unfortunately, in the Inflation Reduction Act, they were only authorized through the end of last year, and they expired December 31st. Congress has failed to act to reinstate them. And in fact, this is why the government was shut down at the end of last year. So we know that people are going to lose health insurance. And unfortunately, a big chunk of the people that are going to lose health insurance will fall into this AYA category. Now, it is important to remember the original financial assistance that existed in the ACA still is there, but the costs have gone up, and for many people, it's not enough to make health insurance affordable. So what is another option potentially for somebody? It might be Medicaid. So prior to January 1st, 2014, in order to access the Medicaid program, someone had to have a low income and low resources, like a savings account, and be able to walk through one of these 4 doors. In the cancer community, most often it was this left door, the Age, Blind, and Disabled program. Worst name ever for a program. The problem was someone would have to go to the Social Security Administration and apply for supplemental security income, wait for that answer, be approved, then go back and get Medicaid. And so there was often a long gap, and people really had to meet the highest standard of disability that we have. Of course, there were challenges there. The ACA stepped in and created a 5th door, and this door was just based on income. No asset tests, you don't have to have another eligibility category, it's just based on income. So the 4 doors still exist that used to exist, but now we have this 5th option. It was supposed to be nationwide, and really many, again, of the people we thought were going to benefit from this would have fallen into that AYA category. The challenge is the Supreme Court got their hand on the ACA and made it voluntary for states. So we currently have 40 states in DC who have expanded, 10 who have not. The 10 who have not represent about 3 to 5 million people who might have access to health insurance had their state expanded. Now, this was, again, game-changing because people with relatively low incomes were now able to access health insurance. We got the Reconciliation Act, HR 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is creating some really significant upcoming Medicaid changes that you all should be aware of. It used to be that states would re-enroll people once a year. Now states are required to enroll them at least every 6 months, but it could be more often. Eligibility based on legal immigration status is changing. We're going to have work requirements. The dates are all over the place. This is going to be very, very concerning. And coupled with the loss of the enhanced premium tax credits, we are again anticipating millions of people losing access to health insurance, not because they're not eligible for Medicaid, but because the paperwork is going to be incredibly burdensome. Think about it now, how hard it is to get someone who's in active treatment to complete forms and stay on top of all the things they have to stay on top of. And now we're saying at the most, you're going to have to wait every 6 months, but maybe you're going to have to send in that paperwork even more often. So we're very, very concerned that people are going to get kicked off that are eligible, but for administrative reasons. It's also going to be a huge burden on the states in systems that are already overburdened. So what we are seeing around these conversations is people are looking for other options for health insurance. And some of the things that people have gravitated towards are things like short-term plans. These do not have to comply with the ACA's consumer protections. They can exclude whole categories of care, like chemotherapy. They can end mid-year and there isn't an opportunity to get health insurance elsewhere. So really sort of concerning. And then there's also this concept of a healthcare sharing ministry or health share programs, which are not health insurance. They are a group of people who have come together and said, we're all going to contribute to a pot of money every month, and then we're going to pay for each other's healthcare. Which sounds sort of lovely, but it's not health insurance. So it's not a guarantee that if you have an expensive condition, that they're going to cover that expensive condition. And if they don't cover it, you have very little recourse. We used to really steer people away from these options. However, with all these changes, we know that people are limited in their choices. And so this might be the only choice for them to get any sort of coverage. Just a word of warning that this is happening. Now, I mentioned that getting health insurance is sort of half the battle. Then it's about how do you use the health insurance effectively. And of course, utilization management is something you guys are all probably familiar with. It's where health insurance companies sort of put in hurdles to accessing care that are theoretically designed to reduce costs. So things like prior authorization and step therapy and denials. And lots of times providers will come to us and say, well, what is it, like, what can I do to be helpful? And anytime someone is in that situation and they've gotten a denial of coverage, you should be appealing that denial. With every type of insurance has a slightly different process, but with individual and funded group plans, there are at least 2 levels of appeal. So you go back to the insurance company and ask them to reconsider. But even if they deny again, people have the right to file an external appeal. And this is where you go to an independent entity in your state and they look at the plan, the medical evidence, and they make a determination as to whether or not the insurance company should cover that service. Now, sometimes people say to me, appeals, it's such a burden, and it absolutely is. It's one more thing on patients' plates. It's one more thing on healthcare professional plates. I get it. However, we know that when people file the external appeal, they win somewhere between 40 and 60% of the time. So conservatively, what that means is half of the time when insurance companies are saying, we're not going to cover that, an independent entity says, you got that wrong and you should cover it. But just like with insurance generally, there are some hurdles for people dealing with appeals. And one of those hurdles is this concept of peer review, right? Where an insurance company hires a healthcare professional to have a conversation with the prescribing professional. But there are 2 things that are a challenge with this. The first is that the healthcare professional that gets hired by the insurance company might not be of the same practice type, specialization, knowledge as the prescribing provider. And so you could have like a retired OBGYN having conversations with a provider up on the latest in precision medicine. So there's going to be a knowledge disconnect there. The other thing is, many times people think that the peer review is the same thing as an external appeal. But remember, the external appeal is an independent entity, and the provider hired by the insurance company is inherently not independent. So even if you lose at the peer review stage, someone could still file the external appeal. Another hurdle is this concept of time, especially with cancer, right? We can't really wait 30 days to get an answer on our internal appeal. So oftentimes providers will find other ways to cover the care, whether that's financial assistance or charity care, or frankly, sometimes the patients don't get the care at all. But if there is a situation where the need for care is urgent, then someone can file an expedited appeal and get an answer within 72 hours. And you can file the internal appeal at the same time as the external appeal and get an answer from both within 72 hours. I cannot tell you, though, how many people we talk to that have no idea, A, that they have the right to appeal, or B, that the external appeals exist. So we know in 1 year, 48 million claims were denied throughout the marketplaces. 99.9% of them were never appealed, even to the first level. And what that means in practical terms is people either aren't getting the care or they're finding other ways to pay for it. Appeals is a huge soapbox issue for us. We have lots of resources in a variety of formats. We also have a relatively new resource called our our Health Insurance Appeals Navigator, which is an AI tool where either you as the provider or the patients themselves can upload the plan information and the denial letter, and the navigator will draft the initial appeals letter for you. It is HIPAA compliant, and it is trained on all the databases you think that it would need to be trained on for that medical evidence. So that's all available on our website for free at triagecancer.org/health-insurance. Now, quickly switching gears into some of the other contributing factors, including employment. Oftentimes, what we hear from people around work and cancer is that there are some big assumptions that get made. So the employee might be thinking, I can't work due to this cancer diagnosis and treatment, and there's nothing that can help me. Maybe it's the employer assuming, well, now that my employee's been diagnosed, they can't work and there's nothing that can help them. But honestly, the biggest problem we see is the healthcare professional's assumptions that their patient can't or wouldn't want to work and should just go out on disability leave. But the reality of the matter is, A, not everyone has access to disability leave or the financial means to just leave work. But also, there are lots of people that like their jobs. They want to go to work. Work is purpose and meaningful. Work is the place where maybe they're not the cancer person and they like that escape. And so our whole mission around this is that we shouldn't start from a place that they can't and there's nothing that can help them, because in reality, there are a number of federal and state laws that provide protections and benefits that might allow someone to continue working if that's what they want or need to do. And then we can't forget that the law is just what the bare minimum of what employers have to provide. And many employers are, in fact, much more generous than that bare minimum. So always starting with, what are the employer policies? What are the benefits that the employer is providing? And certainly that could mean health insurance or disability insurance. But in most places in this country, if someone has access to sick time or vacation time, that's because an employer has decided to provide that as a benefit, not because the law requires it. But if someone does need to stop working due to their diagnosis or side effects from treatment, how do they replace that lost income? And that's really where disability insurance comes into play. There are a couple different sources of disability insurance. So someone might have a private policy that they've purchased or gotten through their job. They might live in one of the handful of states or Puerto Rico that provides a state disability program, or they could potentially be eligible for one of the two federal disability insurance programs. So, all of this is to say that many times there are things that can be helpful, but it does require knowing what questions to ask and knowing who to ask them to. And that really is our purpose at Triage Cancer. The other piece of the puzzle is that many of the things that we talk about require that someone engage at least in personal advocacy. So asking the questions, asking for what they need, filing the appeal, asking for a reasonable accommodation at work or at school. And I really just scratched the surface of the cancer-related legal issues that we talk to people about. Certainly the top three are insurance, employment, disability insurance, and finances, but we talk to people about all sorts of other things. I also just want to say that there are a number of changes that are coming to our healthcare system, some of which we know are on the horizon, but we don't have the details, like what are states going to do with the Medicaid work requirements. Some are things that we are just hearing rumblings about, like additional cuts or court cases. And so we, as an organization, will be doing our best to stay on top of what's changing and translate that and provide that to you all so that you all can help navigate your patients through these issues. If you're kind of interested in what's happened thus far, we did do a webinar back in January talking about the major changes in that reconciliation bill that are going to go into effect in the next 6 months. I will also say a place where we share late breaking news is on our podcast. And these episodes usually aren't longer than 20 minutes. It's myself and our co-host who really just talk through what's going on and how it's going to impact patients. And before I turn it back over for questions, I will just say if you are interested in continuing to learn about these issues, there are a number of ways to do that. So certainly all of our events, as I mentioned, there are free CEs for nurses, social workers, patient advocates, and HR. Our blog, if you don't like podcasts, is another place where we try to keep people up to date with what's changing and what's going on. And then all of our educational materials and resources can be ordered in bulk for free. So if you are at a physical location and want to be able to have hard copy things on hand, you can do that, including our practical guide to cancer rights for young adults. It's about a 20-page guide, and it covers the most common topics that we talk to AYAs about regarding school, work, health insurance, and what options might be available to them. So with that, I will turn it back over.
Monica, that was phenomenal. I know I have about 10 comments and questions, but we definitely want to give folks a chance. And just want to say thank you first and maybe throughout. I mean, the work that you guys do is so meaningful and impactful and needed. Just an immense amount of appreciation from the community for what you do. And I hope you hear that feedback often because it is so impactful.
I really appreciate that. My co-founder, Joanna Duran, and myself were asked a few years ago, like, what's our ultimate goal for Triage Cancer? And we said that we go out of business because we're not needed anymore, that our systems are simplified and that fewer people are getting cancer. But unfortunately, at least right now, given all of these changes, we wish we didn't have to be here, but we're glad we are. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely need you and appreciate you. And I'll kick it over to Scott maybe to start some of the questions, and then I will sneak in a few of mine.
Absolutely.
So everyone, please feel free to either come off mute or put your questions into the chat. So I know Stephen had a few questions here, starting with how are insurance claims and treatments considered different during a hospital admission? So thinking about things like EMTALA, as well as are medical bills being covered by Medicaid insurance being backdated during the application review time?
So I'll start with the first one. EMTALA is the law that essentially says that hospitals have to provide care regardless of somebody's insurance status in an emergency situation. But the definition of emergency is incredibly limited, like incredibly limited. So in the context of cancer, EMTALA is usually not going to be the most helpful thing for people, to be perfectly honest. In terms of insurance coverage, sort of in the hospital and out of the hospital, the biggest challenge we see for people is that most people don't understand the concept of networks. And it seems so simplistic, but remember, 96% of Americans don't understand this stuff. And I often say there should be a class in high school on health insurance and finances because we all need to navigate it, but when are we ever taught how to do that? And so I think that it's sort of the going back to basics to make sure that people understand the concepts of networks and to not necessarily make assumptions that, oh, I'm in a hospital, so every piece of my care is going to be covered in network. The common example we get all the time, well, there's two. One is labs. So the hospital might be in network and your doctor might be in network, but they send you down the hall to the lab. That lab's not in your network. So making sure that people are just asking questions in the course of receiving care. The other piece is surgery and anesthesiologists. So often the anesthesiologists aren't going to be in network, but like you meet the anesthesiologist for like 30 seconds before you're asleep, right? That's not typically the question you're asking them. There is now a federal law called the No Surprises Act, where if someone did their due diligence and assumed that everybody on their care team was in network and one slips in like that anesthesiologist, now the law says that the insurance company has to treat that surprise as an in-network provider. So what's great about it is they actually created a phone number and a help desk where people can submit their bills and say, this was a surprise and here's why. And it essentially takes the responsibility off of the plate of the patient. And now the insurance and the provider have to negotiate payment at that point. So I'm not sure if that was exactly what the person was asking, but those are sort of my 2 cents about it.
That was super helpful. I guess a follow-up question that I have, uh, you know, people can ask questions, but sometimes, like you said, you're in a hospital and you're sent down the hall for labs, and the labs are a LabCorp lab and it's not the hospital lab. I mean, how both as clinicians and providers can we help advocate for our patients and help them with that? Because I don't always know, I'm not checking everybody's plan and policy, and I'm not going to know. And, you're in the hospital, I'm going to order your labs. That's what we have to do. So what can we do to help them through that, whether they're asking those questions or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think if someone's inpatient and the labs need to get done, it's a slightly different story than if someone's at an outpatient appointment and they're sent for labs. I think even just telling someone, hey, here's the order, but before you go get the lab work, you might want to call your insurance company and just double check that the lab is in network. I mean, whether they do or they don't, that's now on them, but just giving them that question to ask. I think if it's inpatient, then it's a slightly different story. And I think hospitals have some wiggle room to be helpful with their patients.
There's a few more questions that have come in. It's a question regarding having the right policy and what resources are available to help folks make those decisions, where are they located, and how do they access them?
Yeah, so I would say Triage Cancer is a great place to start so you can actually understand health insurance, because I think that's step one. I also think it's important for people to remember that health insurance agents and brokers are paid by insurance companies to enroll people in their policies. And so you could have a broker who is going to steer someone towards the policy where they get the most money out of it. We've also been hearing some pretty horrendous stories about brokers selling non-ACA compliant plans, so those short-term plans to people without making it clear that that's what they are selling. I mean, we've gotten at least 3 calls in the last month with that exact scenario. So I think sort of treading lightly with agents and brokers. Through the marketplace, there are sister organizations, and these are people trained in the marketplace. They are funded by federal dollars, or state dollars if your state runs a state marketplace. And they're not paid by what insurance company you pick. They really are just there to enroll people and help people. So I think they're a great option for marketplace. In Medicare, which of course some AYAs might have if they've been on SSDI for 2 years. There's a similar entity to those assisters called SHIP programs, and they exist in every single state. And they can help with enrolling, they can help with billing questions, they can help with appeals. They're really fantastic organizations. On our website, we have resources by location. So if you click on your state, you'll see the SHIP program for your state if you're not aware of it. Because sometimes they're called different things. Like Florida, they're called SHINE.
Super helpful. And I'm going to ask the long question in the chat and kind of as a case study, but a patient who is on FMLA and did not receive notice or was not aware of the need to or opportunity to re-enroll in a large company's insurance plan. Is that an event? So getting cancer, is that considered an event to be able to either change plans or enroll on a plan? Like, is cancer a life event?
I mean, it's certainly a life event, um, but it is not a qualifying event to trigger a special enrollment period into either the marketplace or an employer plan. But one thing, and I'm sorry, I don't even have the chat open. One thing I'm sort of curious about in that setting is if someone's on FMLA, one of the requirements is that the employer maintain the employee's health insurance at the same level. So if the employer pays 50% of employees' health insurance, they have to keep paying the 50% while someone's on FMLA. So sometimes what we see happen is patients don't realize that they have to proactively send in their portion of the premium because usually it's just taken out of a paycheck. But if you're not getting a paycheck, that's not happening. So that might be the situation. I would want to know more details about why they lost the insurance in the first place. But no, it's a common misconception that getting a serious medical diagnosis does not trigger an opportunity to change plans.
Yeah, that's helpful. And this individual is sharing that they know it was not a life event, but just to see if that would qualify. And it's a new year, so they did not re-enroll the individual with I guess, the start of the new year. But maybe more details to follow up on separately as well. I'm going to sneak in an AI question. So
Yeah.
I love, what you guys are doing to help folks, write professional letters and try to combat kind of the machine that's on the other side of being able to deny, delay, refuse. And just wondering your opinion, your thoughts of kind of who will win? Like, I'm sure it's happening on both sides now, where it's kind of, AI talking to AI, talking to
Yeah.
AI, and how does that end? How do you sort of, break through to be able to get past the initial 3, 4, 5 layers that are automated, uh, to then be able to kind of have some movement and open thoughts where it's
Yeah,
going would be
I
great.
have lots of thoughts. I think it's funny that you say that because that's actually how we've sort of been pitching this tool is that we're using AI to fight AI with the insurance companies. Um, but I think the real answer to the question outside of legislation controlling some of these insurance company practices is the external appeals process. And here's why I think this. So in the context of fertility preservation, oftentimes if someone's seeking fertility preservation in most, I shouldn't say most, there's a lot of states where there's no insurance mandate to cover fertility preservation. So in those cases, insurance companies are coming back and saying it's not a covered benefit. But by using the external appeals process and arguing the legal standard, which is that it is medically necessary to preserve one's ability to have biological children in the future to preserve prior to cancer treatment. If you make that argument and you take it to the external appeals, this is an independent entity now that's going to make a decision. But we've also heard insurance commissioners say, if we don't see appeals on an issue, then it's not a problem. And so you asked about, like, how do you sort of stop this? The way you do it is you bring it to the attention of the insurance commissioners in the state, because we've been told that if they start to see a practice or trend, whether it be with a single company or with an issue like fertility preservation, they can issue all plan letters that essentially say, we think you should be covering this because of this. So the way to move the needle, yes, legislation is great, but it's slow, it's state by state. State laws don't apply to self-funded plans, which is a vast majority of employer plans. The way to also attack this problem is through the external appeals process. And I have to tell you, it is wildly underutilized. We actually did a landscape analysis and called insurance commissioners and were asking about the number of appeals. And like, they were coming back like 100 people filed an external appeal in a year.
Yeah, the percentage was I mean, shocking. I learned a ton in your talk, and I think that number will always stick out, and something that I repeat, that is so few people ever reach that level of appeal. Um, Scott, I know there's a couple more questions in the chat. I don't know if you have it open. I always struggle to articulate Dr. Blyer's questions well.
So the question is about the 19 to 25-year-old AYAs with cancer who had better survival and reductions in death rates since the ACA, and even more so in the 40 Medicaid states. So what options are there to help with the 6 states that were hit harder?
So that, yeah, the concern is that those states where we've seen survival improvements, and then all of a sudden we're going, I think, backwards with coverage. Like, what do we do in those states that I guess we thought were in kind of a better place?
My flippant answer is vote. I mean, we are 100% going backwards from the ACA. There was a new marketplace rule just released out of HHS that is going to completely overhaul the marketplaces. We're going to have non-network plans now. We're going to have people with catastrophic plans that last for 10 years, and those catastrophic plans barely cover anything. So we are absolutely going backwards in terms of the options and access to care. In terms of what do we do, I mean, I am serious, like voting is one of the things that we can do. I think it is also about making people aware of the options, aware of what the state rules are around if they're on Medicaid, for example, like what are the reporting requirements? How often do you have to do it? Even down to the form that's going to show up in the mail is on a yellow piece of paper. Make sure you're looking out for that. And we don't have those details yet. So we're supposed to get regulations on June 1st about how states have to roll this out. And then states are going to have 6 months to roll it out. It's if you all remember unwinding post-pandemic where people were kicked off the Medicaid rolls, it's going to be that probably tenfold, in my opinion. So I think it is about learning as much as you can about what's happening in your state. And certainly we are going to be trying to push that information out as we get it, and then communicating it to everybody that you talk to.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I was fortunate to give a talk on kind of progress in AYA oncology at City of Hope last week, and I presented the data that Dr. Blyer is sharing in the chat. And the question that came back is, or was, do we have to revisit those analyses, or will we have to revisit those analyses due to changes in coverage? And I told them, I said, my hope was that, we do the 10-year analysis and show that survival continues to improve. And unfortunately, I think we're going to, like you said, see the opposite. We're going to see decreased coverage, and we're going to see an immediate drop in survival and care access, which it's hard to think that we're going to take away a lot of the progress that's been made, or at least some of the progress. And we definitely need everyone on this call and beyond to just keep advocating, because watching it happen is not the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to see delayed diagnoses.
Yeah, I agree. And that goes along with, delays in treatment. We've done some work on early death because patients are being diagnosed very late in the game. They're not getting access to emergency care until it's a little bit too late. We've got time for one or two more comments or questions. I do see Dr. Blyer turned his video on. I don't know if that means he has a question or a comment, but we'll give you maybe one of the final words, Archie, if that's okay.
I don't want the final word, but I want to thank Mike and Scott for making a question out of my comments and putting it together. But I do want to remind all of us that we showed that the time to diagnosis was shortened with insurance. We did that years ago in Texas and then for the rest of the country. There was no question that we were reducing the stage from 3 to 2 or 2 to 1 earlier because of insurance. So that's another problem. And yeah, we all have to act on all this, not just understand each other.
Yeah, I agree. We do a lot of descriptive work, kind of showing what happened and reporting what happened, and the intervention, and Monica, the work that you guys and other groups are leading, and Nick and others just trying to address those gaps that we've continued to see is most important.
I guess I meant to
Go ahead,
say not
Archie.
just City of Hope, but City of Do.
I like that,
Okay.
Archie, and I assume you didn't come prepared with that because you didn't know we'd talk about it. One more question briefly. Stephen brings up the question of who's our target? Is it insurers? Is it legislators? Is it both? I mean, he brings up for fertility preservation, our friend Joyce Reineke, they've really targeted, legislation and done a really nice job, and that's been a frustrating process as well. What's your thoughts in terms of like where do you get the most bang for your buck in terms of trying to make change?
I don't think there's a magic pill. I think it's all the things. It's doing all the things. I think, working towards state laws is wonderful. And Joyce is obviously a dear, longtime friend of mine. And the work is so important. And it does move the needle, but it doesn't help everybody. And so at a place where we're constantly trying to address all the disparities in access, right? All the disparities, when you start creating laws that are only going to apply to some people based on the insurance they have, are we creating another disparity? On the flip side, once that law is created, it does help bolster the argument for those people with other types of insurance to be able to say, of course it's medically necessary and you should be covering it. There's even a law about it. So it really does take sort of a multi-pronged approach to attack these challenges. As long as we have insurance companies, there's going to be hurdles and barriers that are put in place. So then it's about, well, how do you help patients overcome them? And knowledge is really power there.
Yeah, that's I think a great way to end this session. Again, we were talking about coaching softball before we got on, and my thought was kind of the word resilience and just kind of thinking about what it takes to get through the work that you're doing and leading and get back up and keep fighting. And I think for many of us who really aren't that familiar with, the challenges of insurance coverage, and we see our patients struggle, just it's a huge thanks for being in this fight, staying in this fight, and helping so many people, even though it's, you're experiencing and feeling the frustration of so many who are coming to you for help. So on that note, it's just a lot of appreciation. I tell everyone when you do a really good job on these talks, you have the unfortunate or fortunate opportunity to be invited back next season and for many future seasons. So, yeah,
Anytime.
yeah, much appreciation. Scott and I will kick it back over to Kayla, and please, Monica, know how much we appreciate you and the work of your group.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
Yes, thank you so much, Monica. Mike, I think you set it up so well that Monica, you might be coming on back for us because it's an issue that I feel will always be so critical and so needed to be talked about. So just truly thank you for your expertise as always. One of the things that I did want to share because I feel like it's hot off the presses here, Elephants and Tea and Triage Cancer just released a special edition magazine called Cancer and Finances. So I linked that in the chat for everyone, and we will also make sure that we include it in the email that we're going to send out. But it is a really beautiful collaboration of those first-person patient experience stories, and then Triage coming in and providing their expertise and tips and resources related to some of the financial concerns that patients might have experienced or brought up in collaboration with those stories. So make sure you all check that out. If anyone's interested in getting that, please reach out to us at Elephants and Tea. We can help coordinate that as well if you want hard copies. A few very quick housekeeping things from me. If my dog will stop barking for a few moments. Hopefully it's not being picked up too much. As always here, we are very interested in feedback on both this session and future session opportunities. So I dropped a very quick anonymous survey link in the chat for everybody. If you would be we would be so grateful for you to fill that out. And then last but not least, I am going to share the link to our last session of season 3 of Power, which seems like it's come so fast. Another absolutely critical topic that we're going to be discussing. So it's going to be on Thursday, June 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern. The topic is Small Steps for Big Impact with LGBTQIA+ patients with Dr. Scout and Nina Francis Levin. So please, we would love to wrap up season 3 with another powerful session and topic there. If you would join us, we would love to see you all. Yes, Mike making a plug that we will be back. I don't think you can get rid of us yet for season 4, but we just are so appreciative. Again, huge thank you to Monica, Mike, and Scott. Thank you for coming on and facilitating a really robust Q&A. Nick on the back end and Lisa, the team at Elephants and Tea, as always, thanks to them as well. And we will see you all next month. So thanks everybody and have a good rest of your week and weekend.
Bye, everyone.